He makes hammers and he hangs out with the New Mutants. We're talking about King Eitri. Hi, I'm Nando, and in this series, I take a character from Marvel Comics, I talk about their backstory, their power set, their personality, and I give you some reading recommendations. And this week, we're talking about another Thor character. This is King Eitri, the king of the dwarves of Nittipicking. And listen, he mostly does one thing. He makes stuff. At many points in Marvel Comics over the years, characters have come to Eitri and been like, hey Eitri, I need you to make me something. Sometimes it's good guys, sometimes it's bad guys. Eitri is generally a good guy, so he'll make a good thing for a good guy, and if it's a bad guy, he'll make him something, but he'll work in a little something. The most important Eitri story comes in Thor Annual Volume 1, Issue 11. This is reading recommendation number 1, written by Alan Zelenetz, art by Bob Hall, Vince Coletta, Carl Gafford, and Rick Parker. This story is told from the perspective of the Norns, who are kind of like the fates, I guess, of Norse mythology, and they're just looking back at important moments in Thor's life. One of them involves Odin, basically talking about, I've got this amazing spear, it's the best spear, you guys could ever believe it, and you can't even have it. And Loki's like, I do want to touch this spear, though. So when Odin leaves, Loki tries to touch the spear, it becomes a problem. Odin solves it, but Odin's like, all right, listen, you're not getting anything fun from the dwarves. I'm going to send Thor to get 3 cool things from the dwarves, and you're out of luck, Loki. So Thor has to journey up to Nittipicking to find these 2 dwarves, the brothers Eitri and Brock. In this book, he is sent to find them by the trolls, and I even think they use the word trolls to describe who they are. Like, I think they're compared to Ulik or something like that early on. There is this weird thing going on in the beginning of these books where it's like, are they trolls or are they dwarves? And they're dwarves. So there was like, hey, Odin wants you to make some cool stuff. Go nuts. And they make 3 things. They make a boar, just like an actual pig that can run around and also is made of gold. Then they make a magic armband, and then they make Mjolnir, the wonderful hammer of Thor. And Odin keeps the first 2 things. I guess Loki was going to get the pig or something, but he's like, no pig for you because you touched the spear. But Thor's gifted Mjolnir, and then that's the origin of that. It's a very simple story. We also get another story later in this book of the time that Sif got her hair cut off. So this is another thing that was brought over pretty much directly from Norse mythology, which is Loki cut Sif's golden hair off, and Thor makes him replace it. So Loki goes up to the dwarves, and he's like, hey, you guys, I need you to make golden hair. Odin said he wants somebody to make him golden hair, and you guys got to do it. And the dwarves are both like, no, this is a lie or something, so I'm not gonna make it. I'm making nothing for you. And Loki's like, come on. And they're like, I'll make you nothing. So they make him nothing hair, which is black hair. So if you're reading this, that is what the dwarves say, not me, that black hair is made of nothing. This is given to Sif, and Sif is fine with it, and everything's cool. We don't really see anything from Eitri until the New Mutants get involved. Now, the New Mutants had a time when they went to Asgard and had some Asgard adventures. This is where Rain met her wolf boyfriend guy who we talked about, I think, a little bit in the Fenris Wolf episode. It's not Fenris Wolf, but another wolf. This is where Dani became a Valkyrie, which is a big story for her. And this is something that comes up every so often. If you Google, like, Dani Moonstar, you'll see this picture of her riding one of these horses with wings. And you're like, when did that happen? This is when. Basically, Loki steals all the New Mutants, Enchantress takes them, and then Magic manages to teleport everyone away but herself. So all of the New Mutants go to a different place, and Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, ends up near some mines. And he's from the coal mines, so he's like, oh, mines, I love these. So he goes and checks them out, and he finds the dwarves, and it's where he meets King Eitri, and Eitri's daughter, Kindra, who likes Sam, and Sam protects her. So from this point on, Sam and Eitri are close. When the New Mutants end up back in Asgard, and they're looking for allies, this is because Hela has taken over the Valkyries. Odin's in the Odin sleep, and Hela's like, I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to use the Valkyries to do it. One of them is Dani, so she is out there as a bad guy, and all the rest of the New Mutants have to help her. Eventually, Sam, who is the co-leader of the New Mutants, along with Dani, who isn't around, is like, let's go find those dwarves. They were cool. And Sam goes, finds dwarves. Some of the newer members of the team are like, this is stupid, we're all gonna die. But then they meet Eitri, and Eitri's like, hey, it's Sam, oh, you're the best, I love you, what do you need? And he explains the situation. They all get kidnapped. Now Hela makes Eitri build her own sword, because Eitri builds weapons. That's what the dwarves do, right? Like I said, they built Odin's spear, they built Mjolnir, and they're going to build the death sword for Hela. So Eitri does build this sword because Hela's threatening his family and all of his New Mutant friends, but he builds a flaw into the sword so that it can be destroyed, which at the end of this little story, the New Mutants are able to do. Cannonball manages to crack right through the part of the sword that's breakable. Everybody's saved, the New Mutants go home, everything's cool. So I'm going to say for this little story arc, we'll do reading recommendation number 2 will be New Mutants Special Edition Volume 1, Issue 1. It's written by Chris Claremont with art by Arthur Adams, Terry Austin, Christy Shield, Lois Bakalis, and Tom Borozowski. And like I said, this is the New Mutants' first adventure in Asgard, and this shows Sam meeting Eitri, so this is the start of their friendship. It's going to be an important moment for the character. The only other thing I want to touch on here, because this character, he died eventually during the final Ragnarok story, and I think during the God of Hammer story he was brought back a little bit, maybe, I don't even remember, but we do get one more Eitri moment that I think is interesting. It comes much later in the Jason Aaron Mighty Thor run, but it's actually a flashback to the creation of Mjolnir, which we just saw in that very old Thor comic. Well, we see it again, and it's a little different. And this is reading recommendation number 3, Mighty Thor Volume 3, Issue 12, written by Jason Aaron with art by Russell Donnerman, Fraser Irving, Matthew Wilson, and Joe Sabino. In this story, Jane Foster, who is currently the Thor, is having problems with Mjolnir. We're in those parts of the stories where like, oh, Mjolnir's got a mind of its own and it's unwieldy and she can't figure out what it wants. So she goes to the God Library and reads up on Mjolnir, where the new story is this. Odin protected the dwarves from Olek and the Rock Trolls, and as a thank you, the dwarves, led by Eitri, gave Odin a piece of Uru. Just a little rock, like fancy rock, but basically like, this is the most important mineral we have. It is incredibly hard to find. It is borderline indestructible, so take it as a token of our appreciation. And now we're in like kind of modern writing Odin, although like Odin's always been kind of a jerk, but this Odin's like, this sucks, you guys did a bad job, I hate you. But then the storm of the universe comes and fights Odin, and it is like a literal just like storm that goes through the universe, and Odin manages to stop it and imprison it in the Uru. So you think Odin's gonna be like, oh my god, I was so wrong, sorry about being mean. No, Odin goes back and he's still pretty mean. He's like, turn this into a weapon for me. This Uru captured the storm in the universe. It's very important that we turn it into a big weapon for me. Which they do, and they make Mjolnir. So this is a little different from the origin we'd heard before, but Mjolnir has a mind of its own, the mind of the storm that is inside of Mjolnir, so Odin puts a bunch of enchantments on it so it can't just go do whatever it wants. And that's why nobody can lift it except for people that are worthy. And honestly, like those 3 stories tell you pretty much everything you need to know about Eitri. Odin calls him from time to time and tells him to make something, or other characters, and like he made Stormbreaker for Beta Ray Bill as part of that story. But the dwarves are a race that Odin doesn't seem to really like or respect, so they don't have too much to do. There are some stories where like the dwarves build the Stark Asgardian tech for Fear Itself event, and they make all the hammers that Thor uses in that gap where he's not worthy. Beyond that, Eitri's not an incredibly consequential figure. The dwarves are obviously the best builders around, and sometimes they'll bump into Iron Man and be like, oh, we're kind of the same, in your world you do this technology and we make hammers. Eitri seems to be a good king, seems pretty popular when it comes to the dwarves and everybody that knows them. Obviously Odin hates them, but Odin hates everybody and everybody hates Odin. And Eitri is like loyal to the realm, so he won't let Hela just take it over. He knows that's a bad idea. But yeah, that's about it. Eitri is one of the Asgardians who has not shown up in the Thor movies, but does make it into Avengers Infinity War, played by Peter Dinklage. They've changed the way the dwarves work, so they're really, really big, which is cool. They apparently forged Mjolnir, and also the Infinity Gauntlet, and also Stormbreaker. Doubt we'll ever see him again. It was fine. The one thing I do like about how Eitri and the dwarves are represented here is clearly Asgard and Odin and, you know, Loki when he was in charge. But also it doesn't seem like Odin's checked in a while. Like, they don't really care what the dwarves are doing. They show up for a favor to ask the dwarves to make something for them, and then that's it. And we're talking about King Eitri this week because he was just introduced into the collectible card game Marvel Snap. King Eitri is going to be a 1-cost 2-power card with the activate ability draw a card from your deck that didn't start there. So it's a Thor thing. He's going to work really well with Thor and Beta Ray Bill, and his whole thing is going to be, you're going to play him pretty early in the game, you're going to play Thor, and then you're immediately going to activate the Eitri and then draw Mjolnir. So that's going to make Thor way more consistent. This has the potential to really change how characters like Thor and Beta Ray Bill are used, especially with something like a Lockjaw. Like, being able to guarantee you can pull a Stormbreaker immediately and then maybe cycle it back into the deck and pull it out again, that makes a huge difference. There's other cards I guess this will work well for, like, you know, for Airship, for Thanos decks to put extra cards into your deck at the beginning of the game. It's a good way to get some of those out. It'll also work well with Loki because all the cards in your deck when you're doing a Loki deck don't start there. I also think he's gonna make Frigga a lot more useful. Perhaps my biggest problem with Frigga is that, like, well, are you gonna get the card that you need to duplicate in time? And especially if you're trying to do it with a hammer, you're not even going to be able to draw it until, you know, turn 4 or turn 5. But with this, if you could automatically get it, then play the hammer, then play Frigga in the next turn, get another hammer, that's pretty good. Or do you do it the other way? Do you play Beta Ray Bill and then Frigga, get another Beta Ray Bill, and then Eitri, one of those hammers, turns them both to 12? And then if you pick up the other one in your deck, then they're both 24. So that's pretty handy. Yeah, I think the synergy of the Thor cards is very nice, and like, it's taken a while for the rest of them to come together. Obviously, you know, Loki wasn't in the game immediately, so like originally it was just like Thor, you had Sif, they didn't really work well together. Odin worked well with Thor, and then Jane Foster, now with Frigga, Eitri, Beta Ray Bill. I think this is maybe turning into a viable deck, maybe? I don't know. I'm curious to see how this goes. I would love it if this became a cool deck because I have most of these cards. One other thing about Eitri that's, you know, not super important but worth mentioning, no variants as of yet. So that's, you never see that. And this card should get released pretty soon. So I'm curious to see if they change that. Because, you know, I don't know. I like it when cards have variants. Thank you again to Bernardo Tellish, who helps me put these together. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.